blank spreadsheet here because we're going to go through this chart here. When I was constructing the timeline to see whether or not I had the right dates in view, I used 10 different data points so that the likelihood of being accurate increased because the amount of different data points have to correlate. And when you have that many things that align, it's probably going to be more accurate. Can't say for sure, but that's where we're at. This is the Jubilee timeline. If Israel entered the Promised Land in the year 1406, then the 70th Jubilee from there would be 2025. The question is, what year did they enter the Promised Land? The date of entry is given in the book of Joshua, Joshua 4:19. They came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped to Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. That led to the establishment of the periods of 7, the weeks of years, the Sabbaths of years. Thou shalt be unto thee the space of, thou shalt number unto thee 7 Sabbaths of years, a space of 49 years, and in the 50th year hallow it and proclaim Jubilee. The Jubilees are essentially what Daniel's 70 weeks and the measuring for Ezekiel's temple are benchmarked to. So we need to understand which day and month and year Israel entered the Promised Land to understand when the final one will be, hence the link to the measuring of Ezekiel's temple, which is the start of the 70th week. Now, 1406. This is where we have to go back to the historical record because there is not one person alive today that was alive back then to say for sure which year they entered the Promised Land. Okay, this is where I bring up Excel. So 1406. And we are going to move this over. And we're going to use, we're counting up. So we do +1, and we're going to do that to the year 40. Okay. 41. I say that because Israel wandered in the desert for 40 years. They left on the 14th day of the month Nisan in 1406. This was their first year. They entered the Promised Land on Nisan 10, which was 10 days into the next year. So you have a full 40 plus 10 days into the next year. That's why we go to 41. Okay? So they leave on Nisan 14 here. Beginning of the year, head of the year is on Nisan 1. So you're going to have 40 of these. And then they enter on the 10th day of the 41st year. Okay? 1 Kings 1. No, 1 Kings 6. That's why it's important to understand that Nisan 1 is the beginning of the years, the calendar years. Nisan 10 is the beginning of the Sabbath cycles. That's pertinent. But the head of the year was changed to the month Nisan. That is why it is important for precision purposes to count Nisan to Nisan as the beginning of the year, and then a full 40 in the wilderness, and then 10 days into the final year. So I know I'm repeating myself, but we need to make sure that we don't just count from here to here is 40. No, it would be 39 plus 10 days into the next month. We need that 40th year. So I'm going to probably over-explain, but 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. Taking us through this, and this is honestly just kind of off the cuff. I just sat down and I'm like, let's go through this. So I'm going through this. 1 Kings 6:1. It came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of Egypt. Now, just to point out, as it is with, and I'm using something that we can easily understand. People say that the first year is the year after the event. Notice that is the end of the first year. Consider a child's first year. The first year after birth is from age 0 to 1. Their first birthday begins their second year. So when it says the 480th year after they came out of Egypt, you need to count this as your first year, not the next year as their first year. Case in point, we're going to count up. This will prove my point. This is the 41st year, and they enter on Nisan 10. Ooh, I'm in the dark, so I can't see what I'm typing. Okay, so this 40 full years from Nisan 14 to Nisan 1, and then 10 days into the 41st year. So technically, they left Egypt, technically it was 4 days shy of 40 full years from leaving Egypt that they entered their promised land. From Nisan 14, they left, and they entered on Nisan 10. Okay? Anyway, just want to make a point because this is going to become important from 1 Kings. It came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt. They came out of Egypt in this year. This would have been the first year. Okay? It's not the year after they came out that is the first year. It is the year they came out that is the first year. Just like a child, the first year they come out begins at birth. From birth to the age of 1 is the first year. The first birthday marks the beginning of the second year. So this is where we need to be super accurate. It's not this year plus 480. This is included in the 480, so it would be this year plus or minus 479 to get to the 480th year. Important. It came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the second month, in the month Ziph, which is the second month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. Okay. So this is our entry into the promised land. This is when the Sabbath cycles are going to begin to be counted. We're using this year as a reference point. You'll see how it all works together on the chart. So Nisan 10 of, say, 1406 BC. It was 40 years after they came out of the land of Egypt. The year that they came out of the land of Egypt is the 480th year from or before Solomon began to build his temple. Okay? So now we're going to start a whole nother count. 1446 is our first year. We want 480. So we're going to count down, and then we're going to do, so you can see this, of tens. Okay? This minus 10, we're using formulas. What I'm going to do is count 100 years, and then I'm going to count 80, and then I'm going to add 400, or subtract 400 in this case. So there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 equals this minus 400. Okay? So that's the year Solomon began to build his temple, according to 1 Kings 6. So they came out of the land of Egypt here. They entered the promised land here. This is the year Solomon began to build his temple, according to 1 Kings 6. It came to pass in the 480th year, after the children of Israel were come out of Egypt, in the month Ziph, which is the second month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. Okay, that's the 4th year of his reign. So, we have another count. 967, 968, 969, 970. Solomon reigned for a full 40 years. Okay? That is kind of irrelevant for the purpose, but his beginning of his reign and the 4th year of his reign are here. So perhaps now you can see why these are important. Solomon's reign, 970 to 930, okay? Beginning of construction of his temple, 967. Exodus from Egypt, 1446. Entry into the Promised Land, 1406. So this, based on Solomon's vision, the entry into the Promised Land, tells us which year, if all of these things are correct, tells us which year Israel entered the Promised Land, which is important because that's the establishment of the Jubilee cycles that lead to us to understand when the 70th week begins. So then we have another chart, which I did not include. I will say that this chart actually, this chart actually correlates directly to, is this what? Nope. Sorry, I have to open a couple of things because I'm not sure. Here we go. This chart leads to the 2023 timeline. So this was Bishop Ussher was a source that has been quoted by Answers in Genesis as being maybe relevant to a timeline, and he said it began 2 years before the historical record, that all of the data points were 2 years before what the historical records show. So I'm like, okay, well, let's see if that meshes out. So this is actually what that would have been the 2 years prior. So you kind of have to take this specifically with a grain of salt because I did not figure it out for each of the sets of data points that I have. So essentially, you would move everything back. It's not 607, it's 605. So let's adjust this. While you are, actually, I'm going to adjust this and then I'll come back. Please hold. Okay, I updated this to match this specific timeline and not another one, so sorry. Pause the video, came back. So this is what we're looking at with regard to the second set of data points that we're going to use. And this relates to Ezekiel's vision because his vision is related to when his temple is going to be built. His temple is going to be built as the strength behind the covenant confirmation in Daniel, which is linked right here. So how do we validate that that year is accurate? Well, we come back here. Ezekiel was amidst the Babylonian captivity. And we are given, similarly to 1 Kings 6, 4 different data points in a single verse. What we learned when we're studying this timing is that Ezekiel is in a Jubilee year. What we're going to wind up being able to do is plot the year of Ezekiel's vision on the Jubilee year that is established, or the Jubilee timeline that is established. Why is that important? Because we can validate we have 2 different Jubilee years, which means that our Jubilee count is accurate. And then we just need to know how many. So there are 2 separate sets of prophecies. One in 1 Kings 6 that leads us to understand the year of Solomon's reign, the construction of his temple, which was the 480th year after the children of Israel came out of Egypt. That's important because 40 years later when they enter the Promised Land is when our count begins. So let's plot the next set of data on here. This relates to the 70 years of Babylonian captivity. And again, we go back to the historical record for this. The chart that I had up before I paused the video to adjust it was based on that Bishop Ussher saying that everything was 2 years before the historical record. So I had the years adjusted for that, not for the timeline that I'm actually working on. So this relates to several different data points. The Battle of Carchemish, the first Babylonian captivity, which is when it started, the 70 years of Babylonian captivity started. And that comes from Jeremiah 46:2 and Daniel 1:1. In the 11th year of the reign of the person that was responsible for whatever, so the first of the kings that were involved in the Babylonian captivity, Jehoiakim. He reigned for 11 years. His reign came to an end here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So he actually began. Let's take these out. That's from the previous timeline. So let's take those out. So it was during the reign of Jehoiakim that the first exile of the Babylonian captivity occurred. He reigned for 11 years. And then his successor here was Jehoiakim, who only reigned for 3 months. It was during his reign that the second exile of the Babylonian captivity occurred, and that's pertinent to Daniel's vision. After him, Zedekiah reigned for 11 years, and it was Zedekiah who was on the throne when the third and final exile of the Babylonian captivity occurred. That was when Jerusalem was sacked and the temple was destroyed. So you have the exiles of the Babylonian captivity here, 605, 597, and 586. Ezekiel is giving us two of those data points to reference the year of his vision. Okay? So this is Ezekiel 40, starting in verse 1. In the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month. In the 14th year after that the city was smitten, the selfsame day the hand of the Lord was upon me and brought me thither. Okay. Important to know, he's in the 10th day of the month in the beginning of the year. So he's on Nisan 10. Okay? What year is he in? Well, he's in the 25th year of our captivity. So year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 17, 18, 19, 20, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So from the second exile of the Babylonian captivity, he's in the 25th year. Not that year plus 25, that would be in the 26th year. He's in the 25th year, which means you have to count that year, the beginning year, as the first year. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Add 10, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Okay, is that validated by the next set of data? In the 14th year after that, the city was smitten. Well, that's 586 BC. So year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so Ezekiel's in 573 BC. Okay, when we take that back to our Jubilee data set, if Israel entered the Promised Land in 1406, as we got to by our measuring over here, if here, then they left Egypt here, and that year they left Egypt relates to the 4th year of Solomon's reign, which fits in with the year of Ezekiel's vision, if the exile of the Babylonian captivity were 605, 597, and 586. Those are the historically popular dates. So do we trust the historical records or don't we? Well, that's just something we're going to have to wait and see. But with all of these data points, what we validate is that Ezekiel's vision was in a Jubilee year, because 573 falls on the Jubilee timeline if we use 1406 as a starting point. So now that we have validated another point on the timeline, we can use the same method to keep counting indefinitely. The question is, how far do we need to count? Well, that's where Daniel's prophecy comes in. He was in the 70 years of Babylonian captivity, receiving the vision of the 70 weeks, the 70th week of which begins on the 70th Jubilee. And we know that because Ezekiel was in a Jubilee year prophesying about what would happen in the final Jubilee year. So your pattern of 70s is here. So this is how we come to establish the potential legitimacy of this data set. And because we can plot another data point on here, we know that our calculation of the Jubilee years is accurate. I also did include Josiah's Great Passover. If you look at the events in Ezekiel's end times vision in the Jubilee year to prophesy about what will occur in the final Jubilee year, and you look at the events of Josiah's Great Passover, both events in those Jubilee years basically give you a full picture of what will happen in the final Jubilee year. Josiah's Great Passover, they found the book of the law, they read it, confirmed it. That's what they're going to do here. They're going to confirm the law and they're going to rebuild the temple, which is what Ezekiel's vision is all about. So when you take the events of Ezekiel's vision and Josiah's Great Passover together, you have a full picture of what Israel will do in the final Jubilee year at the beginning of that to start the 70th week. Now, what I find utterly fascinating about this Jubilee chart is that you can obviously take it back to creation. The Jubilees begin to be counted when Israel comes into the land. Leviticus 25:1 says, "When ye shall come into the land shall declare a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, gather in the fruits thereof. In the 70th year, or excuse me, in the 7th year shall be a year of rest unto the land. Thou shalt number unto thee 7 Sabbaths of years." Okay, so let's close this. Hopefully you guys understood the meaning of all of this, how to calculate the 70 years of Babylonian captivity, the reference points, and how to figure out the year Ezekiel was in. Now, let's go learn how to count Jubilees. Thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years, a space unto thee 49 years, and thou shalt in the 50th year hallow it and proclaim Jubilee. Okay, 1406, 1405, 1404, 1403, 1402, 1401, 1400. There are 7 years there. Okay, so thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years. Okay, let's do this. We're going to number 7 Sabbaths of years. 3rd Sabbath, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and in the 50th year, hallow it and proclaim Jubilee. So here is the beginning year of the 49, the 7 Sabbaths, and this is the 50th year, which would be the first year of the next period of 7 Sabbaths. Okay, so that's how you count that. So 1357 is our second Jubilee year. In case anyone's curious, it is not this year minus 50, because again, you have to count this as your first year. It is current year plus or minus 49 to get to the 50th year. 1357 is the first Jubilee from the entry date. That is what we see here. So that's how we do it. So that is the point at which Israel enters the promised land. Okay? And that is what begins the count. There technically was not a Jubilee cycle or period or Sabbath cycles or anything before that. However, you can take them back and establish the beginning of creation when you know the pattern. So that's what we did here. Now, this is all based on the Sabbath. When God created, He created for 6 days. On the 7th day, He rested. That was written into the law, into Exodus, into the law for the people in Exodus 20. And it was written into the law toward the land in Leviticus 25. And it was written across the whole of human history in 2 Peter 3. That one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. That does not mean there will be 6,000 years of world history. A comparison using like or as is called a simile. You have a metaphor and a simile. It's comparative language, not comparing things that are the same, comparing things that are similar. It says one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years. Not the same, but similar to. And that is in the pattern of the Sabbaths. It was written into the God's creative week, written into the law for the people, like the 5th or 6th commandment, Exodus 20, and then maybe the 4th commandment. I'm not sure. Whatever. It's there. And written into the land, which Daniel 70 weeks picks up on, and the establishment of the Jubilee, which is pertinent to the end times, absolutely, and then to the whole of human history. So they begin here and they end here. If 1406, then the 70th week begins on Nisan 10, 2025. We can absolutely calculate that. So let's take it back to the beginning, and that would put creation at 4003 BC. Tishri 1, 4003 BC. And then the head of the year was changed to Nisan in Exodus 12. Now, this is very specifically interesting because there are 3 periods of 40 with these extra 2 years. This is what I say when I say the biblical overview of world history overlaid by the pattern in the Mount. If we, in type and shadow, now I have just given you how to calculate the end of the end, the beginning of the end, in the plain text of Scripture. What I'm going to do now is show you a type and shadow, how the book of Exodus and Joshua overlays world history precisely. And it does so with 3 periods of 40. There is a benchmark event which begins a count. This is Exodus 19 with the giving of the law. After Moses received the law, gave the 10 commandments to the people, he was up the mount for 40 days. We find this in Exodus 24. I will go there and read the verses. Exodus 24:18 specifically. Moses went into the midst of the cloud and sat on the mount. Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights. Okay? So after this benchmark event, the giving of the law, he's up the mount 40 days. Then he comes down in Exodus, where? Exodus 32. Yep. Exodus 32. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down to the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto them, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as this day Moses, that man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. Okay, so then Moses comes down the mount. Joshua and he think that the camp is being invaded. It's like, nope. It's the people causing a stir. I'm just trying to find the voices. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, There is a noise of war in the camp. This is Exodus 32:17. He said, It is not the voice of them that shout for mastery, neither is the voice of them that cry for being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. Moses promptly smashed the tables of stone when he got to the base of the mountain and saw what they were doing. In a fit of rage, the Levites were given the commission to slay the people to the tune of thousands. Moses then interceded on behalf of the people because God wanted to destroy them and start over. And Moses said, No, take me instead. But God said, No, the people will be on the hook for their own sin. This led to them being stuck in the wilderness for 40 years without the men of age dying in the wilderness and being unable to enter into the promised land. However, Moses was down the mount for 2 days to deal with the people before he was given the instruction by God to come back up the mount. He did this in Exodus 34:28. He was there with the Lord 40 days, 40 nights. He did neither eat bread nor drink water, and he wrote upon the tables the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. This is our second period of 40. When Moses returned from the mount, what do we see? Verse 29. It came to pass when Moses came down from the Mount Sinai with the 2 tables of the testimony in Moses' hand, when he came down from the mount, that Moses wist not that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. When Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, they were all afraid to come nigh him. Moses called unto them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned unto him. Moses talked with them. Afterward, all the children of Israel came nigh. He gave them the commandment, all that the Lord had spoken him in Mount Sinai. Till Moses had done speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But when Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he took the veil off until he came out. And he came out and spake unto the children of Israel that which he was commanded. The children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, and Moses put the veil upon his face again until he went in to speak with him. That next period of 40 days is the rest of Exodus. Chapters 35 through 40 is the willful offering that was used to gather the materials to construct the tabernacle in the wilderness and all of the priestly garments. And then they spent 40 years wandering in the desert until Joshua 4:19. They came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. They entered their promised land. Down here, plus 7 years, there was a 7-year conquest for the land of Canaan. After which, Joshua 13, the land rested from war and the lots were parceled to the tribes. So from the giving of the law to the parceling of the lots to the tribes in the promised land, there were 6,034 years in total. The giving of the law to the parceling of the lots from Exodus 19 to Joshua 13 provides a precise overlay of world history. I have this on, where do I have this? I have this on a document called Biblical Events Overlaying World History, where up here that 7 is on there, which is precisely if 1406, a 2025 start to the 70th week, a 2032 beginning of the millennial kingdom, which is a precise 2,000 years after Jesus went to the cross, rose, and ascended. When we take a look at this from a different viewpoint, we find that this period of time, let me go back to what I had open before. Sorry if I'm flipping back and forth. I'm just trying to find what I want. When we go back to this first document that I had open, and we note this period of time, the end of the second 40 days when Moses came down the mount with his face shining like the sun. When you go back to the actual years in world history on this timeline, you will find that this is the period of time when Christ came, had his ministry, not the point that he was born, but when he began his ministry, which ended with the death, burial, and resurrection, the resurrection in which he rose in glory, which is what the face shining of Moses foreshadowed, was the specific point in time when Christ would come and be glorified. After Jesus ascended, he rose in glory and he ascended 40 days later. This is the point in time which related in Exodus to the construction of the tabernacle in the wilderness and the 40 years that they wandered in the wilderness. This is related in the new covenant after this period of time when Christ was here to the building of the spiritual temple. The dispensational aspect of which is that the spiritual temple at the end of this time gets removed and the physical temple will be rebuilt, which is the benchmark event which begins the count, the 7-year conquest for the land, after which the land rests from war because Jesus comes back and forces it to rest from war, destroys sin and wickedness, sets up shop in the millennial kingdom to bring in everlasting righteousness, and then parcel the lots to the tribe in the kingdom per Ezekiel 48. So what we find with all of this Jubilee timeline is that it begins here and it ends here. This is the beginning of the 70th week. However, you can take that back to creation and you can overlay this with the pattern in the mount, the giving of the law, the first 40 days of Moses up the mount. He came down, they dealt with the people, he's back up to receive the tables of stone, after which his face is shining like the sun. And then they construct the tabernacle in the wilderness and they wander in the wilderness for 40 years and then they enter their promised land. And then there's the extra 7 years of the conquest, after which the land rests from war, Joshua 11. Joshua 13 is the lots being parceled to the tribes in the promised land. So what we're really looking at here is whether 1406 is accurate. And I say that because I wasn't there to independently verify any of these dates. However, all of these dates on here correlate in 2 different groups to the Jubilee timeline. Was Solomon's reign, did it begin in 970 to where the 4th year is 967? Because that's what it needs to be to correlate to a 1446 exit from the promised land and a 1406 entry into the promised land, which again is the benchmark. And then do the dates of the Babylonian captivity, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd exiles, are those correct dates? Because those correlate directly to the year of Ezekiel's vision. And his vision has to be in a Jubilee year to make those correct. His vision is in a Jubilee year. So you have to know when they start to know how his the year of his vision correlates, because that's important to the end times, because it is his temple that begins the end times in a jubilee year. So this is what all of this research correlates to, how we get there. There's a lot of it. And while you could just count from the entry into the promised land to the end, you have to know that that's accurate. How do you know that that's accurate? Because of these other data points. If you guys have any questions, let me know, but I wanted to go over that and show you how I did it. If you guys have a better or different or more intriguing way to calculate, shout. But if your way includes modern dates, then don't shout, because those aren't relevant. Any questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. See you later.